The first time I was professor there at 5. I had no idea that I signed up for the course. And the other one was migration border.
All right, report from team one.
All right, we felt like people are longing for. Are you telling a story? You don't have 4 minutes. People are longing for
Rick, you know too much.
stability, some place to land. Where do you find stability? You know, there's been a whole lot of turmoil in corporate and the economy, so people losing jobs. And it used to be a place where you had friends and community and you worked there a long time, and now you're just pushed out the door and you've lost all of that. So people are looking for, where's my community? And you've got your community at home, you might have your church, you've got your family, but you've got the rest of the day. So feeling a little bit lost, and then we said that felt like people looking for a way to be connected in identity, and we thought about how people are trying to be connected through Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and all these other different ways. And so we think people are concerned about financial security, safety, physical well-being. You're seeing lots of ads about reverse mortgages, selling your gold, bankruptcy. You're seeing lots of commercials about all the different drugs that can help you that are always ended by all the things that can do you. And then, so people trying to find a way to deal with all the basic aspects of their lives. And then we think people are driven by fear. And you're seeing commercials about all the reasons you should fear the different healthcare things, or all the reasons you should fear your situation. So then we think people are fearful of, so there's a big safety concern around the world, and then a little bit of losing individuality with all of the information that can be collected about you and that you can find on your cell phone, the internet, and in databases, and you can call and they know who you are and what's wrong, and all those sorts of things. So with all of that, we thought that the basic question was many different questions. I liked your answer. His answer was, well, the question is, how do I deal with all these things? That was a really good question. But we thought, all right, so people looking for stability and trying to deal with fear and trying to deal with, their emotions and their situation. Maybe they're looking for, what's a cause I can attach myself to? I used to come to work and be motivated by that, or I'm attached to this cause or this group, or I'm connected to these people. Where do I find that connection now? Where do we go from here? How does what I do affect all? How can I take care of something and do something that's meaningful? And, where does that happen? Where does that get held together? So there was also a feeling of, so where's the leader that I follow in this cause? Who is it that, says something? So we're talking about the two brothers that were leaders that said things that pulled people together and said, oh, that's what I should do. So where do people find that now if they're feeling a little bit out on their own or lost or disconnected or, searching?
Thank you.
Team one's report.
Any questions from team two?
Well, they don't get to ask questions until they
It's going to be clarification questions. Let's go ahead and
just kidding. Any questions?
Get a question.
Okay.
Hey, Rick.
Okay, say what we said.
We're
We're longing for what is to be heard, for our insights to be used. We're longing for meaningful life, meaningful engagement. Concerned about survival, personal and also the world environment. What we're driven by. I think some of the things that are happening externally that we're driven by are things like the common technologies, the crowdsourcing, Did we say things like Twitter and Facebook and all that, all those kinds of things? But then some positive things are like the minorities movements, women's movements. We just, I don't know if we really synthesize this, but anyway, we're fearful of global warming, extremism like terrorism, that there's no encompassing vision of our leadership for the globe. Basic questions: how can we live together globally? How can we enable rebellion movements? Well, the grassroots kind of things that don't show up in the news, people who are doing so many different positive and helpful things, how can that be kind of connected and enabled? It's about connectivity. And anyway, how do we enable the whole planet to win?
Thank you. Where do you see similarities? Or what questions do you have about either of these?
How can we live together? How can we manage our planet? That sounds similar.
Yeah. Yeah, and the connectivity seems to show up big in both places.
Right.
That's a real thing people are longing for these days, is some way to be connected in something.
Survival's on both pages, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
Survival's on both pages.
Survival.
You know, it's interesting to me that when you know all concerned by, driven by, fearful of, and so forth, that the answers to that seem to encompass the whole social process. They're not just economic concerns or political concerns or cultural concerns. There's a lot of all of it.
Any significant, yeah.
For some reason, I can't remember his name, for some middle-aged reason, I can't remember his name right now, but he's an older activist from Boston, he's really famous. But he was saying lately that the problem of progressives is often that the questions that people are asking are legitimate, but the answers from some sectors are really seen as crazy by the other, but who's really getting good answers, meaningful answers to these questions, instead of ridiculing the questions?
Yeah.
You know, how do I be safe, or whatever. There's a need to address the questions.
These sorts of questions.
Yeah, even if they're phrased as, how do I get over on someone else, or how do I be safe? Some set of questions are not being answered.
Yeah.
The people being unemployed right now, for example, except by the right.
Yeah.
And those answers I don't find helpful,
Yeah.
but I'm not offering another answer. So I think there's something in there, how the questions are addressed.
Only the right is that you answers.
They're giving answers.
There's no real
One thing I don't see up there that I don't think we talked about in our group that much, and that is poverty. That we've really raised an awful lot of people out of poverty in the last few decades in China and India and so forth. And more people are becoming educated. And the cooperation among universities is enormously enhanced through the internet. So if solving the problem of poverty has been a problem throughout human history, lately we've been making reasonably good progress on it. Now that contributes to global warming and so forth. But people are searching for solutions to that. So it seems to me like on the positive side, we're having some success and we're learning. And we have the means to share what we've learned. So yeah, there are concerns, but there's also been some progress.
Yeah.
I think there's another area that we're struggling with that sort of runs through this issue of accountability. How do you, systems or processes and societies to hold accountability? Because things seem to be running away, and then suddenly you're over the cliff, and then everyone says, well, and everyone's defended themselves, and there's no way to see. And the same people who were pushing, for instance, in the subprime thing, were pushing subprime mortgages and liar's loans and so forth, you know, and they're the same ones who are blaming somebody else and coming up with other solutions. So it seems like we need to work quite a bit on the accountability within our social systems.
Well, the reason we were doing all this was to get a broad picture of the human environment in which organizations operate these days. What do you see as implications for companies, given this market that they're operating in? What do you see as implications in terms of HR or products or operations or culture?
John, one thing that goes back much further than our session today, and I know many of us have discussed this at many times, is we've all heard the phrase that about location. It seems to me that in spite of the awareness of things like 26% unemployment and communities in many of our cities, and as high as 30 in some of them, we still have never perceived the importance of leveraging location for where industries locate themselves. We still tend to go to the mahogany, the suburb, the nice neighborhood, because that's what our board of directors expects, and that's what our shareholders expect. And it's very hard to get over that hump. And so I think there's just, we draw a blank in perceiving or articulating enough of the contradiction that surrounds economic need, which industry has the greatest opportunity to address, that in such a way that that indicative can become an imperative. And we do know those are the flip side of the same thing. In other countries, I think they're smarter. But in this one, I don't think they've gotten that smart yet. And it's something to ponder the rest of the day.
I think one of the question, or one of the implications for corporations, the private sector, is that there's no place to hide anymore. If you're doing something wrong, it will be found out in broadcast, and there'll be a group at your door at some point relatively soon. And this is forcing businesses to look at the way in which they operate. For example, in India, the soft drink manufacturers have been challenged by the cry that they're polluting the wells and the sourcing of the water that they've been using for making their bottling and so on. And it's become a worldwide question on what Coca-Cola is doing or what Pepsi is doing. And they're being forced to demonstrate and to show what they're doing is within standards, is not draining that and so on. And so I think this part of this implication is the fact that there's no place to hide anymore.
Okay. And part of that is Coca-Cola has started a rainwater preservation project around its bottling plants in India.
John, I think another implication, I think there are some tremendously underserved markets that business could be responsive to in terms of really finding business opportunity. I think the question, though, is who pays the bill?
You know, 40 years ago, when we talked about the moral issue of the times, it was that 20% of the population was using 80% of the resources. Well, we're in a different situation now. We're coming up to something in which 80% of the world is probably going to be arriving and saying we want our share too, which means lifestyle changes. So that's a huge challenge for the 20% that was able just to do what it wanted to 40 years ago. So we're really, I think that's a severe challenge that all of us that sit in this room and in the similar positions across the world have to deal with.
And there could be a huge market in an alternative lifestyle. All right.
I think too, companies, and you see it in advertising now, have to address how they are being sustainable, how what they're doing is enabling everybody to live together and enabling all of us to make it successful.
I just got an email on one of the listservs that I belong to, or one of the newsletters on organic gardening and organic systems and so on. And the whole thrust of it was stopping Monsanto. That Monsanto is, by its seed policy and by its spreading of monoculture, is destroying the underlying environmental diversity. And so the whole thing was, how do we stop Monsanto? Especially when the Gates Foundation is one of those that is spreading. They modified seed policies of Monsanto throughout Africa, supporting. I mean, it's God help us, it's an amazing question.
And on that, why don't we have lunch? We'll come back this afternoon to look at the role of organizations in social change that will help make a difference.
All right,
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, by the way, if anybody didn't get a copy of the presentation, here it is.
Me, please.
And there's some interesting quotes here I found that just thought you might like about work and meaning. I said something about work is not just about making a living, it's about making a difference. So that's fascinating.
Again, comes work and meaning is in separate.
How many people are in here?
No, they're not separate.
There are probably just under 20.
So if I got 27 stuff, that was it.
That's what I've
Please.
Take responsibility for